Okay, everyone. So today we're going to be starting to look at evidence for evolution. There is a video I'm going to post that I made last year for my Year 12s, but I want to go over the fossil record now because the video doesn't contain that I made last year. So we're focusing on the fossil record, and the study of fossils is what we call paleontology. So what a fossil is a fossil is either the remains or the trace of a organism that has died. So fossils that we probably most associate as fossils are the remains. That's things like, bones, teeth, nails, shells, exoskeletons, and very rarely soft tissue. Those would all be the remains as fossils. There are also trace fossils. So traces are indirect evidence of life. So that's things like footprints, burrows, feeding marks, and coprolites. Coprolites are fossilized dung, so that tells us what dead things used to eat, so they're really useful. So yeah, most of the fossils that we focus on are remains of living things, but just be aware that the trace fossils do exist as well. A type of fossil that's really useful as well are what we call transitional fossils, which are always the remains of something. So a transitional fossil shows an intermediate form between two groups of life. So it shows a point where life is changing. Evolution says that all living things come from an ancestor, and over time groups diverge and split. So a transitional fossil is showing a point where groups of life are splitting and changing. A really good example of this is the fossil Archaeopteryx. Now, at this point, I'd encourage you to go to Google, put in Archaeopteryx fossil, and then just pause this video and have a brief look at it. Because it's a really fantastic example of a transitional fossil and a really well-preserved fossil. You should be able to see, you can even see the feathers in quite clear detail in the fossil that was found. So Archaeopteryx is an intermediate form between dinosaurs, which are obviously reptiles, and birds. So they've got features of both reptiles and birds. So the reptilian features that Archaeopteryx have are its jawed teeth, so it's got teeth attached to the jaws. Reptiles have that, birds don't. It's got clawed fingers, so it's got claws at the end of its fingers, and it's got a long tail as well. Those are all things we'd normally associate with being reptilian. However, it also had avian features. So it had feathers, it had primitive wings, it had a beak, and its bones were lighter than we'd associate a reptile's bones as being. Now, Archaeopteryx probably couldn't fly. It could probably just glide, so they believe that its lifestyle was sort of using its claws to climb up trees to find its prey, and then it would glide back down to the floor, so it didn't actually have powered flight. But that was the beginnings of wings evolving in the bird line. So, like I say, hopefully you've had a quick Google and had a look at the Archaeopteryx fossil. It is really fascinating to see that, I think. So, just to talk about the conditions needed for fossilization. So it's really important for something to be fossilized that it gets rapidly buried. That prevents it from being scavenged or decomposed because we need things to be in a good condition to be fossilized. They then need to be mineralized. So mineralization is when natural minerals actually replace the hard parts. That enables them to be preserved much better than just the bone would by itself. So those are both really important. It needs to be rapidly buried by sediment and rock, and it needs to then be mineralized over time. In very rare conditions, when a dead organism gets preserved in an environment with very little oxygen, like a tar pit, for example, soft parts may be able to be preserved as well. It's normally very rare for soft tissue to be preserved, but in the right conditions, it can happen. It's just very rare. So to finish with, the fossil record, is evidence of evolution because it clearly shows changes in life over time as evolution would predict. Just be aware as well, the fossil record is not perfect, it is incomplete and it is biased. What that means is it is incomplete because not everything that dies will get fossilized. In fact, the vast majority of things will not get fossilized. So those conditions with the rapid burial, the mineralization, the lack of oxygen, it's quite rare to get all those conditions. So not everything's fossilized, and furthermore, not everything that is fossilized gets discovered. So the fossil record is incomplete in that way. We do not have a full record of everything that has lived through the fossil record. And it's also biased. What that means is some organisms and some parts of organisms are far more likely to get preserved than others. So think, for example, of snails and slugs. They're both in the same group, mollusks, but in the fossil record, there are lots and lots of evidence of snails because their shells get preserved. However, there's very little evidence of slugs because they don't have those hard parts. So the fossil record is biased towards snails in that way because snails are far more likely to get preserved. Also, as far as parts of organisms go, you may be aware that sharks and rays, their skeletons are made of cartilage rather than bone. So cartilage, it's like what your ears are made of. It's quite a soft material. So in the fossil record, there's very little evidence of their skeletons, but there is plenty of evidence of their teeth. So for sharks, it's only really their teeth that are usually preserved. So the fossil record is biased towards that particular part of sharks. So that is really everything for the fossil record, but be aware there is the other video that I made last year about other evidence for evolution, so please watch and pay attention to that. Thanks.